Hey, 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 and welcome to the Grit and Wit podcast, where we chat about what it looks like to live out Christianity and how we can have fun and enjoy life in the process. I'm your host, Rebecca Caldwell. Welcome to the party. Hey friends, and happy Tuesday, or happy day, whatever day it is you're listening to this. If it's not on release day, happy day to you. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Thank you so much for listening, and if you're new here, welcome. We're so glad you're here, and I say we because everybody else listening right now is saying, yes, we are glad you're here. So seriously, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, don't forget, share, because sharing is caring. And thank you to everyone who has shared the podcast. So I just want to say, I'll have a free tip for those of you out there who might be caring for succulent plants. Because I've recently had a friend who works in an office that shall remain unnamed. I will not call them out, but I will say that they are trying to kill these succulent plants. I was like, you don't need to water them so much. You need to stop watering them so much. And so I just want you to know that I Googled, like, I'm going to go with the legit, I'm going to find a flower expert, a succulent expert, and I'm going to look up how to care for a succulent plant. And it says the number one mistake many people make with succulents is over watering them. You want to water them, absolutely, but not so much. You want their soil to dry out before you water them again. So they're supposed to be dry. They are dry plants. They are desert plants, friends. Please, somebody help me. Please stop watering your succulents, friends. I will make you a watering schedule so that you don't kill these poor plants. I did say I was going to sneak over and confiscate these plants. I'm not, but I do really want to. So anyways, side note for anybody trying to keep a succulent alive, less is more when it comes to water. Okay. Moving on from the plant discussion. I shouldn't say I don't have a green thumb. I am learning to have a green thumb. I actually had 2 peace lilies and my dog destroyed them, like threw them out of the pots, turned the pots over, and just tried to eat the plants. I literally had maybe 3 little bitty plants that survived, and I repotted it. I'm like, please don't die. And I have seriously nursed it back to health. I'll have to post a picture on Instagram of my plant because it is so pretty now. I'm so impressed by how good it has just survived and thrived. So I'm learning this art of gardening. So who knows? One day I might have just plants everywhere, which makes me happy. I love plants. It's just the caring for them, and because it does take effort, it does take time, and it takes some intentionality. Not a lot, but some. And so, one of these days I'm just going to have this beautiful little patio area with a garden. It's going to be super fancy one of these days because I love fancy. In case you were wondering about it, I'm not always fancy, but I do like it. Anyways. All right, let's move forward. Today, we're actually going to be talking about the topic of, like, don't judge me. We're going there. Let's talk about it. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. We've all said it, right? We think, oh, you're not supposed to judge anybody, only God can judge me, like Tupac said, right? It's in the Bible, don't do it. But, and how many of us, seriously, I've been this person where I do something weird, or if I'm doing something and people are looking at me funny, I'm like, don't judge me. Like, no, please stop. And that's kind of a funny, haha, don't judge me, but, tolerance is a big deal in the culture that we live in. We're in this place where we don't want to be corrected. We don't want to be judged. We don't, like, don't tell me I'm doing anything wrong. Just pat me on the back and tell me it's okay. I'm okay, and I'm going to do better. I'm going to do better. And we don't want to be held accountable for the things that we do wrong. We don't want to change, and we certainly don't want anyone calling us out, right? So we take that line from Tupac, and we're like, only God can judge me. here's the thing. I want to just go ahead and say this. That's a very heavy statement that we throw around. And because if you're talking about literal judgment, yes, there is going to be a judgment throne. You are correct. And we're going to go before the only true, righteous, holy judge, and he will in fact judge each and every human being on this earth, everyone. And so when we talk about like only God can judge me, that's kind of it's a big deal. It's kind of a heavy thing. And so being mindful that, in fact, he will judge us. And so that is something to keep in mind. But we throw around the verse. It's found in Matthew 7 and 1. And it's usually from a place of contempt because we don't want other people to say anything to us about what we're doing. Let's look at it. Let's really look at it and see what was God talking about. What does this mean, really? And so we're going to look at Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 5. So if you want to pause this and look it up yourself and read along with me, you can. But if not, that's fine. I'm going to read it to you. It says, "Do not judge so that you will not be judged. For in the way you judge, you will be judged, and by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take that speck out of your eye,' and behold, the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." And if we break it down, if we look in the Amplified version, which kind of throws all the words that could be used right there, it says, "Do not judge and criticize and condemn others unfairly," note, unfairly, "with an attitude of self-righteous superiority." I want to just note those two things. Don't judge, criticize, condemn others unfairly with an attitude of self-righteous superiority, as though assuming the office of a judge, so that you will not be judged unfairly. Now, it is true, we should not judge, criticize, or condemn other people unfairly with that attitude of self-righteous superiority. Absolutely not. We should never, ever assume the office of a judge where we sentence other people based off of their whatever it is that they're doing. Because what happens is when we judge unfairly, when we go after people, the measure that we use, the attitude that we use towards other people, that's going to be measured back to us. And so Jesus is not saying don't judge anyone. Don't judge anyone. He's warning us that in the standard that we use to judge others, whatever attitude we use to judge others, that is how we will be judged. He's warning us not to take the role of judge. That is not our place. So he's not saying don't hold anyone accountable. He's saying be careful how you hold people accountable. Because if we look down further in chapter 7, looking at verses 15 and 16, Jesus commanded us to know ourselves. Mind you, he lists us first, ourselves and others, by the fruit of our lives. And so he's telling us, be careful how you judge other people. Be careful what you think about other people. Be careful that you are not critical of other people. And we see a prime example of unjust judgment when the disciples condemned the woman who came to anoint Jesus' feet with oil. They thought she was wasting something. They were harsh in their judgment toward her. They were like, well, I wouldn't have done that. I would have done this, this, and this. I would have taken that oil and sold it and gave the money to the poor. I wouldn't have done that. And so what they're judging her harshly, and it's really not their place at all. She hasn't done anything sinful. She hasn't done anything wrong. She's just not done things the way they thought they needed to be done. And so what happens is when people do things that we don't like or that we think are wrong, that don't have anything to do, maybe they're not doing anything wrong, but it's not how we would have done it, and we judge them harshly because of it, and we're like, they could have done that differently. They could have gone about that a different way. God's like, you need to be careful in that, because he comes back, God comes back and he corrects the disciples, and he's like, she did a good thing. She did the right thing. And so we have to be careful that we don't take that place of judging other people with that harshness, with that criticalness, with that I wouldn't have done it that way, because it's not about us. It's not about us. And the same is true with the men who were going to stone the woman who was caught in adultery. They wanted to condemn her, but Jesus saved her by calling out their hypocrisy. And I think it always comes back to checking out what is happening in us. What is happening in us? And so we have to stop thinking the worst about others. That's what God is saying here. Stop thinking the worst about others. Stop speaking only of other people's faults. Stop judging an entire life based only off its worst moments. Friends, I pray nobody judges me off of my worst moments. Anybody else? I wouldn't. Oh my gosh, I would die if people judged me off my worst moments. I hope most people don't know about my worst moments. We can't judge others without considering ourselves in their same circumstances. We don't know what's happening in their lives. We don't always understand what's happening in their lives. And so we cannot judge others without being mindful that we ourselves will be judged. In verse 2, it says, "For in the way you judge, you will be judged. And by your standard of measure, it will be measured back to you." I don't know about you guys. I want to receive grace. I want to receive mercy. I want to receive forgiveness. That's what I want. And because here's the thing, we have a really, I think we have an easier time accepting grace for ourselves, but we are stingy with it when it comes to other people. I heard Christy Wright say the other day, she was talking about being in traffic, right? And traffic's kind of crazy, and you accidentally cut someone off and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." And you wave and you're like, "I'm sorry." You don't know, or maybe you're a dude and you're like, "I'm sorry." I don't know. Your man voice. Sorry. Apologies. Anyway, but you're like, "Oh gosh, please don't be mad at me. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that." Oh, and you feel really, really bad that just happened because you didn't see them and you cut them off and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so, so sorry." But if somebody cuts you off in traffic, it's like, "Oh no, they didn't." And you go into this complete rage and you're super angry about what just happened. And you don't know, they may be the one sitting in their car and they're like, "I'm so sorry." Right? They didn't mean to cut you off. We don't know what's happening, but we have an easier time accepting grace, but we have a really hard time giving it out. And so we judge others by their actions. We judge ourselves by our intent. And so we have to be careful that we are kind, that we are gracious, and that we don't, that we extend that to others freely. There's a powerful motivation for us to be generous with love, forgiveness, and goodness to others. Because if we want more of those things from God, we should give more of those things out. We have to be those people who are generous with love, forgiveness, and goodness to those around us. In verses 3-5, this seriously, I love this. Just imagine this happening, okay? So Jesus says, "Why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but don't notice the log that is in your own eye?" Now, when it talks about a speck, you think that's itty bitty. Think about a splinter, right? And imagine you have this splinter in your finger, and you feel it. You know it's there. It kind of is. It's bothering you a little bit. It may be a little red, but you can't see it. And so you get other people. You're like, "Hey, will you see? Can you see if there's a splinter here? Can you look?" Or when you have something in your eye, imagine having something in your eye and you're like, "Oh, my eye hurts. I know there's something in there." And you're like, "Hey, can you see what's in my eye?" And it says that this guy comes over and he's got this huge log sticking out of his eye. And do you want to ask that person first off for some help? No. What happens? They come over to you that have this huge log sticking out of their eyeball, and if they come at you, they're probably going to just hit you a bunch. They can't even get close enough to see the speck in your eye because they have this huge log sticking out. Imagine this huge, heavy, ugly log sticking out of somebody's eyeball. First off, that sounds a little gruesome. It sounds a little gross. But it hinders our sight. Imagine being the one with the log in your eye. You can't help the person with a speck in theirs. You can't see. You can't get close enough to them because you have this big thing hanging out of your eyeball. It's heavy. You're messed up because your eyes, you can't see. And Jesus says, "You hypocrite. First, take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." It's not that Jesus doesn't want us to help other people, but if we do not first allow Jesus to help us with our crap, how can we help other people? Also, I love that Jesus is very illustrative with his stories. It lets me know that he's a funny guy because, let's be real, a log, like a huge log hanging out of somebody's eye, here, let me help you. Hopefully this plank coming from my eye doesn't smack you in the face while I'm trying to help you out. And so we have to be careful that we do not go around trying to help other people when we're messed up. We haven't had help ourselves. And so just think, like, you look at the religious leaders when they brought the woman taken into adultery to Jesus. And she had certainly sinned, absolutely had sinned. But their sin was still there. And Jesus exposed it. And he says, he who is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone. He wasn't saying that she was not guilty of sin. He was saying, but you're guilty too. How dare you try to stone her when your sin has been unaddressed? How dare you try to condemn this woman when you are walking around with your sin and you don't care about it? How can we judge other people when we're walking around with our sin and we don't care if it's there or not? Because it maybe looks different. Because it's not a sin that we maybe struggle with. Charles Spurgeon says, Jesus is gentle, but he calls that man a hypocrite who fusses about small things in others and pays no attention to great matters at home in his own person. Let me say that again. Jesus is gentle, but he calls that man a hypocrite who fusses about small things in others and pays no attention to great matters at home in his own person. And so anytime that we are quick to call someone else out or be critical of someone or something that they are doing, God wants to say, hey, what's happening inside of you? When we are so concerned with other people and how they are falling short, it's probably time for us to examine our own lives. And we may need help because usually we can't see. I mean, there's a huge plank in our eyeball, okay? We cannot see. It makes things hard. And so we may need a little help. We may need Jesus to come in and help us. Logs are heavy. He may even have to bring the dynamite in and blow it up, but we need a little help sometimes. But I think the biggest thing that we can learn from this is that we're on the same team. We are on the same team. If we're all after Christ, then we have to go after him wholeheartedly. He's not saying don't help one another. What he's saying is don't kick each other while you're down. Extend an arm and lift one another up. It's, I want to help you get that speck out of your eye, but can you help me get this plank out of mine first? It's being willing to be corrected. It's being willing to accept help in the places that you're struggling with, that we are struggling with, right? Whatever it is that we're struggling with, help me so then I can help you. Because we're in this together. We're fighting for Christ together. And so can we be those people who come alongside and link arms instead of tearing one another down? Can we build up? Can we dig out the golden people? And it's not about not correcting one another, but it's about being willing also to be corrected, being in that place of humility where we don't pick up a stone, but we lend a hand and ask for a hand in return to help us in our stuff. And so, friends, let us move forward and be less critical of one another, be less judgmental of one another, but to judge one another and examine one another's life in kindness, in love, in generosity, in patience. Can we live lives full of the fruit of the Spirit like I talked about a couple episodes ago? Can we extend the fruit of the Spirit in every area to those around us? Let's do that. Let's do that. All right, friends. We're going to wrap it up there today. I hope that this episode spoke to you. I hope that it helps us to grow. Let's be honest. It's crazy to me that sometimes we as Christians quickly attack our own people. We do. We quickly attack our own people when people don't say the things we think they should say or do the things they think that we think that they should do. I'm a little tongue-tied. But we quickly attack our own people. And the problem with that is that you cannot fight against your own team and expect to take any ground from the enemy. We have to link arms together, even when we don't agree. Even when you're not doing things exactly how I think you should. Even if you're pouring the oil out on Jesus's feet and I'm like, we could have sold that. We got to link arms and be gracious with one another and help one another. And yes, correct one another, but in kindness. It's in that place where we come together and we're like, hey, this is something that I've noticed in your life that maybe needs to be fixed. But it's knowing when and it's knowing how, and it's moving in love and being led by the Holy Spirit. So, friends, if you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure you share it on social media or text a friend, a link, whatever you want to do, however you want to do it. # Grit and Wit Podcast. Sharing is caring, all that good stuff. And if you really enjoyed it, make sure you go leave a rating and review over on iTunes. You'll get a shout out on the podcast. And if you want to join the Grit and Wit patrons, the VIP, the insiders, the Cool Kids Club, you can head over to patreon.com/gritandwit. That's patreon.com/gritandwit. That helps the podcast continue to grow, continue to get better. Hopefully, we're going to just keep this train moving down the tracks, okay? And so I'm just so grateful for all of my patrons. I pray for you guys. I'm like, Lord, bless them. Thank you for them. I'm so grateful for all of my patrons. Y'all are amazing. And yes, I hope you all have a great, fantastic day, week. August is here. School is starting. And yeah, it's back to the routine. Fall is quickly approaching. Also, stay tuned. My hair will be changing soon. It is purplish right now, and we got a new do coming. So for anybody interested in my hair story, you can follow me over on Instagram at Becca D. Caldwell. And as always, I'll talk to you next week, friends. See you then.